Okay. Hi, everyone. We'll wait for a moment while people get settled. Welcome, everyone. Hello and welcome. We'll just wait for a second and then we'll get started. Hello, hello. Welcome. I think we can start in a few seconds. I think we'll go for it. So let's go. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to today's webinar. Hello, hello. We can see everyone joining. So welcome to today's webinar called Autonomous Vehicles, Rethink What You Know. It's a pleasure to have you all here. My name is Naila Senor, and I will be moderating today's session. The event is co-organized by All Things Urban and EIT Urban Mobility. So who are we? All Things Urban basically is the largest career platform for urbanists with an international community. We have more than 75,000 professionals working on city challenges worldwide. All Things Urban provides career guidance, educational resources, professional networking opportunities, and we help urbanists at every stage of their careers. And EIT Urban Mobility today is bringing you the learning platform UMX, so Urban Mobility Explained. UMX is a learning platform that offers dozens of free online courses for professionals who want to upskill, reskill their knowledge in urban mobility. UMX offers courses that are free, very dynamic and very short. Later in the webinar, we'll show you quickly what they look like. Meanwhile, I'll share in the chat so you can check by yourself what these courses look like. And as you get settled, I'll let you know that this webinar is being recorded. We'll send the webinar recording in a follow-up email for everyone who registered. And just a little housekeeping rules for Zoom. You have down in the bar the chat option. So here you can let us know your ideas, opinions, etc. But mainly in the webinar, when you want to ask a question, we encourage you to go to the dedicated Q&A section, which is down at the bottom as well. So we can find your questions and you can upvote the ones you like. So we can find them later. And you can drop us a message already in the chat to tell us where you're coming from. So hi from Madrid, and tell us what are you looking forward to learning today? It would be nice to hear a bit from you. We'll make sure when you write that you chat with everyone, not just hosts and panelists, if it's not already set by default. And let's go. Here are the house rules, so let's get started. Yeah, we see people already saying where they're coming from, so we'll see a big diversity, I'm assuming. So yeah, we're here today to talk about mobility in cities, and particularly, as you saw, about autonomous vehicles, AVs, that's what we're going to call them. So in the webinar, we want to shed light on what AV technology really is, how it works, and most importantly, how it can be used for good. We know that there might be some doubts, skepticism, different narratives, but today what we'll explore is the different potentials of this technology to boost public transport, reduce car dependency, make urban spaces more inclusive and resilient. If you're in the mobility field, we hope it's going to help you consider the societal impacts of AVs in your projects and policies. And if you're here out of curiosity, we aim to offer a new perspective on a technology that might and is already changing how we move in cities and around the world. And for this, we have our two experts today. We have Liisa and Dario. Let me present you. Liisa Anderson is head of safety and operations domain in Ruter Fremmot, Ruter being the public authority, the public transport authority for Oslo and Akershus counties in Norway. Liisa, you work with the ambition to scale a large fleet of shared autonomous vehicles to complement the public transit fleet. You aim to create a competitive alternative to the private vehicle journey and to complement the existing public transport infrastructure. So Liisa, you will set the scene and give us an overview of what kind of problems autonomous vehicles can help us tackle, giving us an idea of how AVs can complement existing public transport and how things are working in Oslo, for example. I'm going to share your LinkedIn in the chat. And Dario, let me present you. You're project manager at Espaces-Mobilités, Belgian design office that has been supporting public authorities and transport operators. And Dario, you previously managed a startup focused on real-world deployment of autonomous vehicles, and now which are now part of the deployment of autonomous shuttles in Belgium. You'll dive deeper about what's happening in mobility across the world, share lessons from the robotaxis in the USA, and you will bring us a bit into the future, which is already the present in some places. So here's your link, LinkedIn in the chat, so you can contact them. And just before giving the floor to our speakers, I'll let you know how the session will go. We'll first have the presentations by Liisa and Dario. And while the speakers are presenting, we invite you all to post your questions in the Q&A section, preferably not the chat. We can collect them. After the presentations, we'll have the Q&A part. I'll select some of the questions that are the most upvoted for you and for Liisa and Dario to answer. And now we're going to just quickly launch a first poll question so we can see some answers. And Liisa, you can go for it.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting us. So I'll just start my presentation. I can see the poll going on here. Okay, so my name is Liisa Anderson. I'm from the Public Transportation Authority in Oslo, Norway. I wanted to start a little bit in talking about the challenges that we see as authorities and some also as operators across Europe. We are targeting to be delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is, of course, a consensus across Europe that this is our ambition, that the transportation sector is meant to be delivering on our Paris Agreement. The economics for public transit is a conundrum these days. We see that we are spending a lot of tax money every year on the same existing services, and we need to think about the future of how we can finance these public transportation services in the future, because it is very cost intensive, and we are competing again against the car and the private car ownership. And for us as well, we see that we have an aging population, and a lot of the drivers we have today will soon retire, and the same actually happens across Europe today, that we see that the lack of drivers is actually a key sense of urgency and a challenge for us, because we have to then at some point also shut down some of the existing routes because we actually don't have drivers. And across Europe, there's been a lot of reports the recent years on what kind of shared autonomous services and AVs can do for urban mobility, so autonomous vehicle services. And our take on this is definitely that what we are seeing in the robotaxi space is not really the most sustainable way to tackle this market, and I'll go a little bit more into that. And as you can see from the Draghi report, we are facing a lot of choices, especially in Europe, so we need to figure out new ways to actually think about new innovation and how we can integrate into our existing ecosystem. So within Ruter, our vision is what we call sustainable freedom of movement, and that is incorporated in everything that we do. So even though we are a small country, we are a large country, but small by population. So we are the largest public transportation authority in the main capital of Norway. So Oslo is the municipality of Oslo owns 60%, 40% is the surrounding region around Oslo, which is called Akershus. We have already reached zero emission goals before and ahead of target, and I will get into a little bit why we were able to actually achieve that. So all our buses, trams, metros, and ferries are fully electrified. So the city of Oslo have quite aggressive climate goals. Some would say not aggressive enough, but I think one of the most impressive things is that we actually have articulated a goal that we want to reduce car traffic by 1/3 by 2030 compared to the numbers from 2015. And that is an important message to be made, because we have in Norway incentivized private electrical vehicle cars for many years now, which means that all the private vehicles, or almost all new private vehicles now, I think it's 94, 95%, are fully electric. And these cars are very, very attractive. So a lot of the people that we are on a daily basis that are commuting and using our services, the alternative that they have is actually the private electrical vehicle. And in many cases, this is really an affordable ride because electricity isn't that expensive. We've also, again, incentivized the usage with no toll, free parking, and so on. And what we also see is what's happening in the private vehicle market on the Teslas. A lot of the full self-driving technology is already in place. And for us, especially in Norway, we have a high penetration of Teslas. So our fear is basically what would actually happen if all of these private vehicles become autonomous, and then people would drive a lot more with like empty cars around in our streets. And we see the ambition that Elon Musk has on bringing an Airbnb on wheels with the entire fleet. And you guys already know this, and it's quite well known that the private cars today, we aren't really using them that much, but they are very used when we actually need it. And since they're taking up a lot of space, we need to figure out alternatives on how we can actually incentivize ride sharing. And also, of course, this has happened during the pre-pandemic. We've already had our streets already clustered with a lot of micromobility, and the micromobility service is very, very great, but we needed regulation in order for it to actually function and for it to actually complement existing public transport. And one of the things that the public transportation authorities are obligated to do is fulfilling the public service obligation. So whenever a ride-hailing company such as Uber or Bolt are picking up or actually accepting your ride, they can also just let you know that unfortunately this didn't really work out right now for us, so we just cancel your ride. For us as public transportation authorities, we cannot really do that. So we needed to figure out what all our existing services can do and what can be actually the next step in order for us to increase the mobility for our users, but also actually increase the revenue so that we can take a larger market share from the private car. So within Ruter, we have a unit called Radical Innovation. And within the Radical Innovation, we were able to actually mature the electrical bus market way ahead of target. So when I led with saying that we've already reached this target, it was because we actually worked with the market and matured the market. So even though a lot of the operators and service providers in the market said that it wasn't possible to get any electrical buses, we actually worked with the market in order to get the buses fully electrified. In 2019, we conducted a study called the Oslo study, which is similar to a lot of studies across Europe, where we analyzed what would happen within our existing service area if all the private vehicles, as I said, the individual car scenario, became a reality. So the congestion would increase tremendously, over 100% increase, because a lot of people that can't really drive a car today would suddenly have access to their privately owned vehicle, and all the private vehicles that are driving people into the city center would then drive back empty at home. So what we are looking at is the integrated scenario. And in the integrated scenario, we were able to actually replace all the 600,000 private vehicles with 30,000 shared autonomous vehicles by complementing it to our existing mass public transport. And that will create a much more efficient system, of course, help us reduce the congestion, reduce the need for parking spots, and traffic and road incidents would be drastically improved. So I wanted also to highlight that Our daughter company on the West Coast, they're innovating on the existing fixed routes model. So the already AV buses are existing in the market. But on our side, we looked at the opportunity to scale our on-demand services with autonomous vehicles, because we do believe that this is where we can innovate business models and also really transform the mobility. Because let's face it, even though the bus doesn't have a bus driver, no one will really wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'll sell my private car now because there's no bus driver in the bus. So we already have conducted a lot of pilots already since 2018. And now we have our, what we call the last pilot live, where we have at the moment 5 vehicles running fully on demand in our service area, which you can see on the right side. And we're now scaling up with 1 or 2 more suppliers. So next year we would have up to 15 or 20 autonomous vehicles in this pilot. So for the first 5 vehicles we have a safety operator, and for the next 10 to 5 vehicles that we're scaling with, we're going to remove the safety operator completely. So I wanted to share a little bit, because some of the questions we usually get is, oh, but what do you do with winter operation? Or is the technology actually sophisticated enough to run in winter operation? And this winter, we really prepared our fleet and the technology for a massive snowfall, because it was a heavy winter. So even though our existing buses really struggled this winter, we were able to actually run our autonomous on-demand services. And I think this video also kind of showcases, if we're going to deliver a service closer to where people live, the vehicle size really, really matters when it comes to conditions such as this. So a large bus would really, really struggle to getting close to a home where people live, and also dropping people off where they were actually going to go. So again, within the Radical Innovation Unit, we have a project called Fremmot. And this project is there to actually, what I said was, we have our last pilot now, is going to be closed in 2026. So after this, we need to actually prepare the market for what is going to happen after we're done with this pilot. So in Fremmot, we are really creating an alternative to the private vehicle journey. And for us, a real system change is really needed. So instead, we can really think about buying in a larger belt, or just getting a new hole in it, or we can start to really exercise and think about how we can actually do the little more hard part, eat healthy, and move along and move much more. And that's kind of the same as we see. Instead of kind of building and increasing the road size, we need to really think on how to optimize our existing resources instead. So what we've been following for the last couple of years is, of course, the different technology providers, which Dario is going to present to us. But in this industry, they're heavily focused on robotaxi. So for us as Public Transportation Authority, we need to create a large enough demand so that these service providers can actually function into the system and alternative we believe is most beneficial. And if we learn from the ride-hailing companies in San Francisco, they're promising us a lot, that they're going to reduce congestion, they're going to serve first and last mile, but the data actually shows us that this is not really happening. And just from the last 6 months, there have been conducted a lot of studies on actually this topic, how shared mobility can either complement or compete with public transit. So this is why we really need to work across Europe on standardizing a service offering that can benefit society and, of course, our citizens. So we've listed up some design criteria that we need to standardize on. So ride sharing is, of course, a criteria. We need to see it as an integrated fleet so that we can optimize the right type of vehicle to the right type of trip type. And having the integration to mass transit is where we can optimize again around the resources and ensure that we deliver on the most sustainable ride. And it has to be designed as a real car replacement. So if the car can do it, we have to do it. And we can only do this if we have a large scale. So I'll just jump to this. So the transformation that we see it is that in the first stage, you really need to see before you can actually believe. And then when you get up to the thousands, this is when you can actually combine and try to optimize your system. And in the last stage, this is where you can completely transform the entire system. So we have a quite aggressive roadmap in Oslo on how we want to scale this service further. So in 2025, we will increase the volume as we have. And then in 2026, if the market is ready, we are definitely ready to get this fully integrated into our existing public transportation system. And lastly, I just wanted to share a little bit based on the Oslo study and other surveys, we can see the real benefits for the citizens, what they can save, what the city of Oslo actually can reduce in number of cars, and of course the vehicle driven in our service area, and of course for the society and the environment. So I will just close off with a short little video.
My family has a busy schedule, and in the modern world, we rely on our private car to manage our everyday logistics. That's why we need access to on-demand public transportation that can help us get where we need to go, when we need to go, on our own time schedule, available anytime. The opportunity to share safely when visiting our grandparents, meeting our friends, and creating new memories. Fremmot, on demand, shared, public transportation, available for you 24/7.
Oh, sorry.
My family has a...
Dario, do you want to take over?
Hi.
Yes. Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Dario, if you mind,
Yes.
I can do a little transition because we would like to do the little poll, checking on the result of the poll. So sorry for interrupting, Dario, and thank you so much, Lisa, for your presentation. I really also like the concept of sustainable freedom of movement. And as a quick summary, we can say that we saw in your presentation that we need to incentivize ride sharing in autonomous vehicles to avoid having a lot of private cars with very few people in them. And instead of building more roads, you recommend optimizing our roads, and AVs can be one way of doing this by increasing the demand so that the fleet can function properly. And we have already some questions in the Q&A, so we can take them later. But just before that, we wanted to check the poll because it was very interesting for us to see what's the current opinion about the narratives on autonomous vehicles, because some people are skeptical, some people are optimistic. So here today we have around 80 people, and we have 100% who answered, and we have a quarter of you who are positive and excited, a quarter who are on the other edge of the spectrum who are concerned and skeptical, and in between we have cautiously optimistic and neutral. So it's a quite divided opinion today. So Dario, here the challenge for you is to see how you can take up the skepticals and see how we can actually look at this from another perspective, and how the optimism can actually be managed, actually, to not be overly optimistic or extremely skeptical. So now, Dario, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks. It's actually a good transition because let me quickly switch to my presentation. I will first start by presenting an overview of the current technology and the current robotaxi services that we see popping out in the USA. And I'll start with a video report of the study tour that we made in August. And actually bringing people to test those robotaxi is the best way to let people go from skeptical to positive. So I think it's a good transition. I'll actually directly start with the video. So I'll speak over it. You'll have no sound from the video itself. You should be seeing it now. So we went to San Francisco in August 24 for a study tour focusing on autonomous mobility. The trip was organized by Espaces-Mobilités, the consultancy firm I'm working for, and ITS Belgium. We brought a relatively large group of 30 participants from public institutions who were there to get to learn and explore the recent advancements with respect to robotaxis. The first activity was actually first ride in the Waymo robotaxis, because Waymo, which is the Google subsidiary, the former Google self-driving car project, have a commercial service already open in the USA. They have driven 20 million miles on public roads and have over 10 billion miles in simulations. So Waymo is actually active in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Phoenix, and in Austin too now. They open a fourth city. And we were able to test the technology in various environments to show how this service is actually today already active and functioning. One of the first challenges that we noticed for autonomous vehicles was the management of curbside. So actually, how do they actually use the curbside, and how should cities manage pickup and drop-off zone? The Waymo app is basically a Uber app where you enter your destination, the vehicle shows the route. One specificity is that you have to give your drop-off and pickup point every time you start a ride. As you can see, we're ordering a lot of robotaxis throughout the week, and we really saw a big challenge in terms of space occupancy from those vehicles when we're riding around. We'll switch in a few seconds to a view of the Tolan depot of Waymo, where you see also some real practical, pragmatical challenge that we saw throughout the day. The vehicles are equipped with a really advanced HMI, human machine interface system, where the vehicle can show everything you see thanks to LiDAR cameras and radars. So that's all the small sensors you see fitted around the vehicle. With those sensors, the vehicle can detect any obstacle, person, car, traffic lights that surround them in those urban environments. So I was speaking about the Tolan depot. So Tolan is one of the biggest depot for robotaxis in San Francisco. You have hundreds of vehicles there, and it's quite interesting to see that the depot automation is really advanced. You still have a human in the loop for charging the vehicles and cleaning them, but for the rest, the vehicle drive around the depot autonomously, and there's really, really low human intervention to make sure the vehicles drive around. That's one of the challenges also when deploying autonomous robotaxi systems in cities, is how do we manage and who will have to manage those depots? And that's something we'll discuss also a little bit later. I'll go on with the study tour we made in August. So we also visited the Tesla factory in Fremmot. The goal here is not to make advertisement for Tesla, but we were able to test the last FSD system, so full self-driving supervised system from Tesla, which is not an autonomous car. It's a really advanced driver assistant system, but still not fully autonomous. But that's also another part of the market that we have to tackle. Neuro was another visit we were able to do during our study tour. Neuro is actually working on delivery pods, and delivery pods is also a relatively large market within autonomous vehicles. Neuro has been approved for road operations in California with those relatively big pods that are allowed to ride on public roads among cars, so not on the sidewalks. Neuro is actually now shifting to robotaxi and to licensing model. They are willing to sell their technology to various vehicle providers. One other highlight of the trip was Pony.ai, which is a Chinese company that was founded in the USA. We were really impressed in the pragmatical approach to market from this company. As we'll see later, they have signed a contract with the country of Luxembourg. They have a huge fleet of vehicles running around in China, and we expect those robotaxis from Pony.ai to start operations in Europe, probably in a few months, or at least starting testing and mapping in a few months, starting from Luxembourg. Google Street View was also a really, Google Maps was also a really interesting visit, because we were able to discuss with the environmental insights engineering team, which is a team working on modeling cities to make them more efficient when battling global warming, mostly. And then I'll finish with this part, which is a conference we made at the University of San Francisco, where we had the chance to meet with local regulators, so the San Francisco Metropolitan Transit Agency, the DMV from the state of California, Cruise, a subsidiary of General Motors, who made the first public appearance since they had an accident 1 year ago. Some of you might have heard. We also had lectures from professors from the Bike Coalition from San Francisco and from advocacy group for disabled people. And it was really interesting for us to understand what their point of view was. So the bikers, cyclists, and disabled people when being confronted to autonomous mobility in those urban areas. So that's it for the video report from the trip. I'll go back to my slideshow. Should be coming full screen now. So still on Waymo, and I speak a lot about Waymo because Waymo is probably the most advanced company with respect to robotaxi today. They have a huge commercial service. They're active in 4 cities, and they are close to 200,000 paid rides per week. To give you an idea of the scale, on the left side, you see the service area in Phoenix, and on the right side, the area of Brussels. I put Brussels because that's where I'm from, but only to give you an idea, it's a 25 per 50 kilometer stretch. So there's no limit today in the size of, not a lot of limits today in the size of area the vehicles are able to tackle. I will then jump to another topic, which is the way Uber today is handling the arrival of robotaxis in the industry. So Uber strategy actually is pretty broad. They tackle mobility, delivery, and freight. Today we focus on mobility because it's what interests us as urban planners mostly. But delivery and freight are also an important part of the autonomous mobility system, but that will be the next webinar. So Uber actually wants to deploy those fleets of vehicles from various partners to feed their Uber and Uber Eats system. I'll quickly go through a whole list of partnerships that Uber made in the last few years, only to show you how fast it went for Uber to build the ecosystem. So they first started collaborating with Motional for Uber Eats to deliver food packages. So of course, having a 2-ton vehicle driving alone with a cheeseburger doesn't really make sense. But that's not the point here. Unfortunately, Uber only wants to make money. So that's also another part of the discussion is how do we have to use those vehicles to make them run around efficiently. Then in May 2022, they announced robotaxi rides, always with Motional, which is a joint venture from Hyundai and another tech company. They announced a partnership with Waymo in October 23, where you were able to be matched with a robotaxi when ordering a ride in the USA. They have signed a partnership with BYD for electrical vehicles, but also for autonomous vehicles. They announced a partnership with Cruise, the General Motors subsidiary, which is one of the most advanced, probably after Waymo, in terms of robotaxi developments. They announced a partnership with Wave, UK-based company working on AI-based autonomy, I would say. And this is also an important thing. So now they have announced that they will operate Waymo cars in Austin and Atlanta, but it won't be Waymo actually operating the fleet. Uber will be managing and dispatching the fleet. So Uber, which has always been a tech platform bringing drivers and guests together, are now going back to managing the actual hardware, so the actual fleet of robotaxis. More recently, they announced a partnership with WeRide, a huge Chinese company who just went public a few days ago. A partnership with a Russian company named Avride, well, ex-Russian because they moved their headquarters, and that's it for the partnership. The thing is, we still have to be aware of the fact that there are still a lot of challenges ahead of us. On the left side, you see it's a print screen of an article about Uber Driver. The point here is there is a human resource problem with Uber and with driver today, and for sure it will still be the case when robotaxis will get on the market. So that's something we'll have to keep in mind. On the right side, you see a various article stating that Uber and Lyft did increase traffic congestion instead of reducing it. So of course, if you have a lot of robotaxis that are cheap and efficient and easy to book, you'll have a lot of those issues again. Quickly overview about what's happening in Europe now. I like to show this this small presentation, which is from Arthur D. Little Future of Mobility study that came out 1 month ago. Most important part here for me is that robotaxis, autonomous mobility is an enabler. So it's like a central part, but it's only an enabler for all the stuff to happen, to match the demand and the mobility supply. And there must be a big hat about vision, policies, and governments that must come from public transport operators, public transport authorities, to make sure that robotaxis are used the right way. Still in the Arthur D. Little study, there was this small sentence that said one way to accelerate beneficial implementation is to rethink use cases and reduce expectations. For instance, going into those kind of use cases from depot automation to small urban campuses, bus, transit, and so on. While those make sense, for sure, they are needed, I think it's an error to say that we must reduce expectations. I think it's too little and too late to only focus on those small deployments. We must focus on those small deployments for sure, but also on border scale deployments like Liisa was showing a few minutes ago with Ruter in the Oslo region. Liisa spoke about Oslo, but Hamburg is also one of the cities that is looking quite seriously into robotaxis. They're aiming at having 10,000 robo shuttles in 2030. A very interesting point here is that the Hogbahn, the public transport authority, is part of the project. So we see there's a will to keep the robotaxis as an advantage for the society, and not to have to be spectators of like Uber companies coming to the European market. Oslo, we already had an overview about that. So 30,000 robo shuttles in 2030. That's a really nice target. And then also Luxembourg, so the country of Luxembourg is now launching a collaboration with Pony. I'm showing those pictures not only because they are nice business pictures, but those guys are actually the ministers of foreign affairs and economy that went to the United States to sign this MOU with Pony. So here again, we see a strong will from the public authorities to attract those companies and be able to collaborate with them to make sure the deployments are done the right way. I spoke a lot about USA and Europe, looking into China. At China, so now we have actually a huge amount of really strong tech players coming from China. I put the biggest ones here on the right side of the slide. What you see on the left side are all the test zone and all the places where you have actual commercial deployments of robotaxis in China. So it's big, and they are really advanced. I spoke about WeRide and Pony, but the other ones are really advanced too. That's only to give you an idea of how it looks like in China. Of course, when they do something, they do it big. So you have over 2,500 robotaxis on the roads, and I think it's even much more now because they are ramping up pretty fast, trying to move on and to finish not too late. This presentation, sorry about that. Other important topic about China is the strong public institutional support that those companies are receiving. For instance, thanks to all these testing zones and infrastructure improvement that China is putting in place. Quick word about the fact that we are now shifting from a retrofitted type of vehicles to a custom built type of vehicles, which should be able to unlock ride hailing. So that's a central point, as Liisa was saying, and we understood that, because the issue with the ride hailing is that everyone says they want to do it, but nobody actually does it because it's difficult. People want to be alone. People want to be comfortable in their rides. So we have to enforce that, and it's already a good sign to see manufacturers proposing larger capacity vehicles meant for ride sharing and not only ride hailing. Last slide on from my presentation is actually a list of let's say, checklists or points that should be tackled when preparing and planning robotaxi deployments from the public institution point of view. So I try to, we also with my colleagues, we try to focus on 5 different points. As you can see here, I won't go into details into each of one of them. We can discuss this more if you have specific questions, or you can contact me afterwards. But it's clear that we have to prepare, we have to plan for those deployments because they will come. And it would be better to make sure that the public authorities have the capacity to do that. And that's our goal also when going, for instance, to the USA for study tours, is to build the capacity around how it should be done and how to do it in the right way to make it right for the society itself. Yeah, that's it. That's for me. I think I'm not too late. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. If you have any question, I'll be happy to get deeper into those topics with you.
Thank you so much, Dario. Perfect. So that was a great sharing of examples of how robotaxis are actually working in reality. We saw a big glimpse of your trip in the USA. You also mentioned regulation, and it's something that's clearly important because we have a few questions that were coming up related to safety, and even those of you who ask questions in the registration, there's a lot of mention to safety. Liisa was already answering some questions in the Q&A section. I do recommend that if you want your question, if you see a question that you would like to be answered, please upvote it because we're having a lot of questions, so we'll need to select a few. Dario, in your presentation, we also saw that there's a lot of companies that are already launching and collaborating with public authority, which is something we saw with Liisa. So there is public support for this. So yeah, it brings us back a bit to the previous poll about skepticism. So it's something that's really part of the reality. And about the second poll, which we asked before your presentation. So we asked, would you consider shared autonomous vehicles as an alternative solution to privately owned cars? And while we're still receiving responses, there's an overwhelming majority that is saying yes. There's an 85% for now that is saying yes, people would consider autonomous vehicles as an alternative. I do assume that autonomous vehicles, as you're saying, in ride sharing and not in private ownership. So that's very interesting. And so now, after these 2 presentations, which were basically a glimpse of the topic of autonomous vehicles, some of you might want to dive deeper. We had some questions in the registration of people who wanted to know more and possibly get a certificate. So here, precisely, we're doing this webinar as a collaboration between All Things Urban and UMX, and precisely UMX does offer courses and certifications if you want to know more and incorporate this new knowledge in your work and your career. So I do encourage you to check some of the courses on the UMX platform. There are many and they're free. I'll paste in the chat some that could be relevant for you. They're very short, 1 hour and a half, some of them, so you can finish them in a day. So I just pasted in the chat the introduction, the introductory course, which will equip you with the basics on the topic. So today with Dario and Liisa, we saw like a broad overview, but if you want something more, in depth about the basics, you can go there. And there's also another course that we want to show you, which is called An Opportunity for Cities, Autonomous Vehicles, An Opportunity for Cities. This course was co-created by UMX and experts from Factual. It's a well-established mobility innovation strategy firm. These courses are relevant for different kinds of profiles because you can get different insights on the challenges, like the infrastructural, regulatory, and commercial challenges. So I'll just briefly share my screen to show you what it looks like, and then we'll get back to the Q&A. So I'll share my screen to show you what the platforms looks like. This is UMX platform, and so basically you just log in. These are the short courses that you can fit in your schedule. The most interesting part is that you can get the certification for a small fee, and then you can upgrade your knowledge, and this one was very well rated by the users. So this is if you want to dive deeper. And now let's go into the Q&A because there's a lot of very interesting questions. Liisa, you were already super active in answering. There's already 4 questions that were answered. So we'll try to pick some of them. Hopefully we'll try to cover most of the ones that were that were in the Q&A section. There's clearly an interest in safety. So I'm gonna try to bundle the questions about safety together, and then we can go into other kinds of questions. So one of the questions about safety is, how will you take the safety operator out of the vehicle? Can you be confident enough that the vehicle is safe to drive with the passengers fully unsupervised? Well, this is the typical doubt about AVs. And let me find the other one, which was talking about the emergency procedures. So what is the current existing emergency procedures in autonomous sharing cars, public transport, for example, health emergency, violence, harassment, etc. So here, Liisa and Dario, up to you.
I can make the answer on the safety part regarding the removal of the safety driver. So usually the way it works is that there's always a few phases. The first one will be testing with a safety operator with passengers, then a testing phase without safety operator and without passengers, and then a phase where you allow passengers to enter the vehicle without a safety driver. It depends a bit on the companies and how it's actually done, but you always have a successive phase with gate decisions to make sure that the system run efficiently and safely. The safety measures are actually linked to the technology itself and to the operator. So at the moment, it's still unclear, or not. It's not unclear. It's, let's say, there's no common safety measures because there are a lot of different players. But it will actually depend on who has to decide when it's allowed to remove the safety driver. He will be the one eventually deciding what are the requisites and requirements to make sure you are allowed to ride without a safety driver. So it's kind of a non-answer I'm giving here because it's not fully clear, because it still have to be defined, basically. In the USA, for instance, in California, it's the state department, the DMV, that has to approve the vehicles for deployments, meaning for commercial services without safety drivers.
Yes, and I think that is also somewhat the similar requirements in the different European countries as well. We have some local variations, but in principle, you could say that it's going in that kind of same direction. And then, of course, you have the vehicle approval, which is the EU type approval, which is a little bit different from the US.
And maybe one word, you usually have an independent safety assessor who analyzes the procedures, the vehicle systems, the redundancy of the sensor. So every type of systemic systems, and he usually advises the operator potentially to allow the full scale deployment.
Thank you.
Yes, and every vehicle also have they have on-road assistance, and they have a vehicle control center. So all the vehicles is also controlled in the back end. You can never kind of remotely drive these vehicles, but you can send commands to the vehicle in order to kind of sort out the situation.
Thank you to both. There's clearly a lot of decision making, and there needs to be certain actors who take on certain responsibility, and here regulation is very important to establish the right protocols in every situation. Another upvoted question was about the costs. Partly for the clients, but also related to the company. So one question that I will bundle with the other: what would be the expected cost for the clients, both for the autonomous sharing cars and the public transportation? And the other side of the coin is that someone was writing, I'm concerned about private profit and lack of choice not benefiting society. So how do you tackle these questions?
Well, I think that's exactly why we're trying to create some sort of sense of urgency with the rest of the public transportation authorities and also operators across at least Europe, because this is also, of course, our fear that the societal benefits get kind of lost in this. I think for the price point of the service, when you get up to scale, our price point will be lower than having your private car. And the more we scale, the closer we can get to a public transportation ticketing fare. But in the beginning, for us, in the seeing is believing phase, we really, really need to get people to understand that this is also public transport, and that this is actually developed as infrastructure, because as public transportation authorities, we run a lot of pilots, and we usually get people very engaged and very involved. And then we say, oh, the pilot is over, and now you have to go back to do whatever you previously done. So for us, it's very important that we don't start to mess a lot with ticketing and fares. It has to be part of the public transportation system, and therefore the fares is also set by the public authorities. So we will be kind of in the same ecosystem. And of course, in the beginning, these services are very expensive, but investing in the long-term perspective, this is where we can really get the sustainability effects. And we usually like to say that our investment and our return on investment and the dividends we get is sustainability. It's not profitability.
Thank you, Liisa. If Dario, you want to continue, or I can.
No, enjoy it. I think we have a good example of how it can be managed from public authority side. And we speak a lot about robotaxi, like in urban areas, but there are other use cases like a public transport feeder for last mile that can also be tackled with autonomous vehicles. Other topic, but it can be broader than what we are discussing now.
And I also think the investment side of things is very interesting, because if we think about this as infrastructure and at large scale, then this is where we can also really, really optimize for these really specific edge cases in certain rural areas where we really can't offer a very good service today. We can suddenly offer something which is actually running fully on demand 24/7, which is a really different use case than what we actually can do today. So I think the potential is huge here, and I think how we can co-create this as a public-private partnership is where at least we believe that we can bring the most value to society.
Great, thank you. I'll pick some other questions. There's a lot, so I don't think we can cover all of them, but we'll keep them and see how we can give some response to that later. Another question is, well, two questions that I will bundle about the ideal environment where this functions. So Dario, you showed in your presentation that it actually can work in very large scales. We saw the little maps, and a question here is, do you see this model working as well for small towns and remote areas? From the video, they mentioned the service will be available anytime. Is this also possible for these areas? And the other kind of complementary question is, what's the optimal urban environment for the demand? Because Liisa, you were mentioning that you need to actually increase the demand. So how do you merge like remote areas and a high demand? Here the question continues. They say the size, the number of commuters, the age of the roads, the design of the curbs. So all of these things, what's the ideal environment?
Well, I think it's fair to say, Dario, that the ideal environment isn't yet fully finalized. But again, the impressive thing with the technology today is everything is pre-mapped. So that's a kind of a prerequisite for level 4, which we are looking at right now. And I would say, as long as you train your model on the environment and infrastructure you're going to run on, it will be kind of sufficient enough. And the second question, if it's going to run in very non-dense areas and very rural and sub-rural areas, well, that is why we need to think about this really holistically, because we have peak hours, we have rush hours, we have all of these commuter lines where sometimes the high capacity train line is the most efficient and most sustainable, but in some use cases, actually having a shared on-demand ride-sharing service complementing, as Dario is saying, is actually where we can increase the revenue so that we also can afford to have all of these edge cases covered. So I think it goes a little bit hand in hand. We need scale.
Yeah, we can tackle rural areas. It will probably have to be subsidized like any public transport today in Europe, but it can be much more efficient, much more flexible and easier to put in place. I don't think there's a huge difference. Like it will still be difficult to tackle rural areas with robotaxis because the density is too low to actually make it profitable. But that's where you have to have public investments.
Great. We'll take one last question. So it's a bit hard to select, but we also want to take some time to ask you on your advice for people who are here. So we'll do that right in the end. I think, well, one of the last question, maybe that's connected to what you were saying, considering that cars require significant space to operate and park, and this is something that you also touched upon, Liisa, the parking, and they do transport fewer people actually than well, larger vehicles if they're small. So what are the benefits, if you can give like these key messages? So what are the benefits of autonomous cars rather than prioritizing mass public transportation and multimodal solution? I know you already touched upon, but maybe this can sum up and give some key messages to people who are still not really like clear on that.
Well, I think the benefits are only there if it's complementing existing public transport. If you look at it separate, you can't complement or optimize. So that's when you can get the full kind of value for the investment. And yes, mass transport is really, really great, but we have to admit that the private car represents a lot of the trip types that we really can't tackle today, and there's a reason for it. So in the shared autonomous space where you complement existing public transport, that's when you can start to optimize as well. So I would say, yes, you require a lot of space, and unfortunately in the beginning, we would increase the volume and number of vehicles on our roads until we can start to then incentivize the shared fleets over the private vehicle fleet. So this will go into cycles, but we need to think about it long term. Otherwise, we can't really do the systemic transformation. Dario, do you want to emphasize?
No, it's quite clear. I think one of the main advantages would also be to have much less parked cars. So you would have more cars potentially in the first place, but then you would free space from non-moving cars. Although you have other problems like cars running around empty. So you have benefits, you have other things that are less interesting, of course, but both have to be studied and anticipated. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anticipation is key. And here you're giving us an insight into, well, the future, because it's already here, but it's also part of the construction of our collective future in the cities. We're arriving to the end, but I would really like to ask both of you a question that we like to ask at All Things Urban, which is related to, well, career advice, people who might be interested into getting in this field. So I'd really like to ask you to wrap up a bit and maybe talk about briefly your own experience. So what is your advice for people who would like to start working in this field or shift their career into this field or make some transition into working with autonomous vehicles? Anyone can start. Dario?
You can start, Liisa. Oh, okay. I can go. Yeah. So so on my side, I got into this topic quite by chance. I'd say I was working in a completely different environment in the nuclear industry, and I shifted to autonomous vehicles. And the thing I think is really interesting with autonomous vehicles is that it will have like a global impact, not only on mobility, but also on urban planning, on the technical job. So actually, any part of any job could be one way or another impacted or linked to autonomization of vehicles being on the road, in the air, underground. So if it's something that attracts people, attracts somebody, I guess there's always a way to find a link with autonomous vehicles, because they reach a lot of different type of jobs and environments.
Great. Yeah, I'll jump shortly. I think this space, as Dario is saying, is just growing, so you can tackle it from multiple angles. For me personally, I just started by saying yes, and was part of different companies where I was asked to work on this. And I think there are a lot of both public and private initiatives in this space. So if it's urban planning in a city environment, if you're working on European level, there's a lot of initiatives going on where you can both seek guidance and mentorships and so on. And there's a lot of places to basically just search. And I know one of the questions were about workforce. I can tell you we need workforce in order to get these services up and running. So investigate the Waymos, investigate the Waves, just do research on LinkedIn and see what kind of jobs that are popping up in this space, and then you kind of get your head going. And don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that will be maybe the key advice into getting into this.
Perfect. Thank you to both of you. So, first of all, thank you for your amazing presentations and for answering all the questions so thoroughly. We hope it's been of interest for those who asked the questions, for those who attended. We couldn't take all the questions, but we'll see what we can do with that. So our session is now coming to an end, and I will let you know that as you get out, there's a feedback poll that I will share with you in the chat that you can either answer here or you will answer once you leave the webinar. So I also want to announce that we do have another webinar with UMX coming up next month. This time it will be about accessibility for all. With a focus on children. So it's going to be very interesting. We'll explore key issues surrounding child-friendly accessibility. We'll have case studies and hear insightful presentations as well, like Dario's and Liisa's today. And again, today's session was a brief glimpse into the topic of autonomous vehicles. We do encourage you to dive deeper in the topics. Feel free to explore the courses of UMX, which I previously shared. Here's another time the link, and it's here in the screen. You can, if you're using your mobile, you can use the QR code. So again, thank you for all of you who are here today. You will receive a follow-up email with the recording and all the information related to UMX courses and this webinar. So that's it. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed the session. Please do give us your feedback. You can reach to All Things Urban, EIT Urban Mobility, Dario and Liisa through their LinkedIn. And that will be it from our side. Thank you, everyone. And wherever you are from in the world, have a great day or evening, morning or afternoon. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.